And what we did notice is there's an implicit truth in design. It's always true in product. This has always been true, is, as I put it, you can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. Very often, you'll see people say, hey, here's what we need to do. I don't like that problem. Now you're stuck. You can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. People's problem usually isn't their problem. It's their problem with their problem.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to accept it.
Yeah.
And if you don't accept it, you can't get, it turns out, there are some people who teach them the history of design and even philosophy of design. But the truth is that there is a deep, largely unstated, even in the design community, undiscussed set of ideological points of view that really matter. You go into empathy and do these iterations, and then we believe by faith, that we will find a solution. We actually believe that the answer is out there. We actually believe that that's an empirical experience that you can't think of by yourself. We're going to go co-create. So we believe in this co-creation thing. There's a whole bunch of belief system embedded in design's methodologies that we never talk about that way.
Yeah.
And one of them is that design only works in one place and one place only: reality. It does not work in the land of should, it works in the land of is.
I'm Ranjor, and this is Remake, a podcast about design, systems, and society. In each episode, I talk to someone who's trying to change our lives for the better in some meaningful way, whether through a new product, new venture, or a new way of looking at the world. And I try to understand how they came to it, what makes them tick, and what we can learn from them. Today I'm talking to Dave Evans. Dave worked on the first computer mouse at Apple, founded the Life Design Lab at Stanford alongside Bill Burnett, and is a best-selling author of 2 books, Design Your Life and Design Your Work Life. Informed by early tragedy, by his own missteps along the way, and by his Christian faith and contemplative spirituality, he created a transformative design thinking process that has helped thousands of students and adults at Stanford and around the world to figure out what they want to do with their one wild and precious life. In this conversation, in the shadow of the epidemic and his wife's final battle with cancer, we talk about what it means to lead a joyful, vital, and meaningful life. We are going on a brief hiatus for the rest of the year, and we'll be back in January with new episodes. So I hope you enjoy this last very meaningful episode of 2020 as we hear from Dave Evans. So I'm sitting here with Dave Evans. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Aaron, good to be with you.
So as usually these days, I like to start with just a kind of a check-in, like how are you doing these days? And I know you have a specific situation. So how are you in the world today?
How am I doing? Well, I'm living deeply in paradox. I just wrote a long note about this to our friends. So I'm actually doing great and I'm doing awful. My wife is dying. Last March, my wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She beat breast cancer 20 years ago, came back with a vengeance. And, our second book was released February 25. My wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer on March 3rd. The world shut down on March 15th. It's been an interesting year.
Yeah.
And that journey has just progressed. Literally, we're speaking on a Monday, and this Saturday, about 50 hours ago, we stopped chemo and went on hospice. So we're in the final lap of this track. My wife's probably going to last maybe 4 or 5 weeks, maybe a lot fewer than that. So she's dying. And so we're very much in the place, talk about reframes, we're very much in the place of what are we doing here? How do you die? If you hold that death as the consummation of life, not the end of it, which is the way we think about it, or we think there's more than meets the eye, so we think there's something beyond that borderline, then you get to find out what can you really put your hopes into action and get traction with it? How do you invite people into the community of that experience? We live very publicly. We have a large life. We have a lot of people involved with us. And so a lot of people are going through this with us. So part of our job is to allow them to do that. There's a Celtic term in Celtic spirituality. The old Celts, the guys that roamed around what we now call Ireland, talked about thin places. And thin places were particular locations on the earth, this pile of rocks, that cliff, where apparently heaven is a little closer to earth than at the other places. So if you wanted to encounter the divine or the cosmic, go hang out in that thin place because more stuff happens there. We're walking around in a very thin place right
now. Yeah. It's you've worked your whole life on the well-lived life and joyous life, and it seems that that transition or that final part of life is part of it, right? It's
Well, it absolutely is, and everybody gets to do it, but you only get to do it once. There's nobody but rookies at dying, and it's a project. It really is. We were just talking. A good friend of mine who's close to this conversation with us and has, for a variety of reasons, I think mostly because he's willing, and most people aren't, he has really closely companioned a lot of people through dying. And I mean, he's not a hospice worker, what have you, but he's been the guy that's walked right next to quite a few people. And we were talking about, and I can't imagine going through this with the support we have and without all. My wife and I have both been working on our spiritual lives pretty hard for about 40, 50 years. And it turns out if you do the work, then when you need it, the tools are there. If you haven't done the work, the tools aren't there. We know some people who are really struggling. Well, frankly, they haven't done the work. And so that's a lovely thing. And I was talking to my friend about this. His name's Joe. And I said, Joe, how do people do this? He said, well, Dave, most people don't do dying. They either deny it or they pretend. And so it's a relatively small number of people that really go, open-armed, front-faced right into it and actually do dying. Which we're trying to do, and it makes a difference. Anyway, so this isn't the Kubler-Ross hour, but nonetheless, that's what we're doing here.
It reminds me of the last lecture by Randy Pausch. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Very vividly.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look because he has such a positive attitude towards it and a very methodical in a way.
Right. I'll give you an example. We talk about reframes all the time, and in fact, in our second book, Designing Your Work Life, which is to help people redesign right where they are, you may not be able to jump out the window and start all over again. Right. We have a chapter on don't resign, redesign. Redesign in place. You actually have more agency than you might think. And there are 4 strategies for redesign in place, which are reframe and reenlist, remodel, relocate, and reinvent. But the first one, reframe and reenlist, is literally inventing a new narrative without making any structural changes whatsoever. And you're just talking to yourself. Well, hey, wait, the self-narrative matters tremendously. It absolutely creates the reality of the experience you're having.
Yeah.
A reframe that my wife just published to our broader community of people, because we just hosted 24 people at our house for Thanksgiving. I can't tell you how hard it is to get 24 people COVID cleared for us in a minute, but don't go down that path. But we did. And it's going to be here last Thanksgiving, right? So right now we're doing everything we're doing last time. Well, if you made this is the last time, I'll never get to blah, blah, blah. Again, you're just in gut-wrenching grief 24/7. Yeah. So Claudia, bless her heart, comes up with, no. Here's the framing that I want you all to hold with me. There's the reframe. It's not the last time. That's true. Yes, it is. But I don't want to hold it that way. I'm holding this as one more among many. So as we gather around this Thanksgiving table with 24 people, we've had so many of these gatherings, and we've loved these people since they were babies. And isn't it great that our life is one where this is one more among many? So I'm going to enjoy this right now, and I think of it as yet another member of this whole platform, this whole portfolio of lovely experiences. And that's a transformative reframe. And what it actually does is it frees you to have what you can. If all you're talking about is this is the last one I'll ever do, then what you're really focusing on is next Thanksgiving when she won't be. I'm spending all the time while she's alive right in front of me thinking about the empty chair of next year. How stupid. Understandable, compassionate, and human, but stupid and not life-giving, not generative, is that way of thinking. The intentional life, designing a life is about living very intentionally. And it's not for, it sounds cute and cheerful and all that, but it's not for sissies. This is hard work, and it takes tremendous mental, intestinal, and spiritual fortitude and courage and discipline to pull it off. I have been working extremely hard on not thinking about the future for 10 months because there's no damn point. Doesn't do me any good at all. I've actually been surprised. I'm actually really proud of myself. I'm astonished at how successful I have been in not entertaining thoughts that don't do me any good. My brain's a very busy place. It's an easy place to get lost. And I'm amazed I pulled it off, frankly.
It's in a sense, the present is all we have always.
There's actually a cosmic quantum physics argument there that there really is no such thing as time. Time is just a dimension. There are locations of it, but it doesn't really exist. And now is all you can ever experience. There's a buddy of mine who doesn't wear a watch. He wears a rubber band. When people ask him what time it is, he lifts up his arm and he snaps the rubber band, twang, and he goes, "Oh,
it's right now.
It's now o'clock again. It's always now o'clock. What time is it where you are?"
I like that. It's a little radical. I still need my watch to know where I'm going.
And I love watches. Yeah.
But I'm wondering if we're in this reflective mood. One thing that I like to start the conversation with is to try to find a pattern that kind of guided you throughout life. And so my first question is always, what's something that you've believed since childhood that still drives you, still guides you today? And how did you come to hold it?
Oh, that's actually pretty clear. I think a very formative experience in my life was when I was 9 years old. My father killed himself.
Wow.
So my father died when I was young. Now, we didn't know that he died at his own hand. And that's still, frankly, a little sketchy because no note was left or what have you. But it was a massive drug overdose. And it's pretty hard for those pills just to jump out of the bottle and down your throat without your knowledge. And of course, and our mother didn't think a 9-year-old boy and two twin 12-year-old girls deserved to grow up thinking that they weren't worthy of sticking around for. So she absolutely managed this massive secret for decades, which you could say is subterfuge, but I think it really was kindness. And then in our 20s and 30s, we got the rest of the story. Took a while to figure that all out. Holy cow, what do you mean? So that was a big deal. But nonetheless, I was fatherless. Now, the family stayed together. Mom was there. We weren't destitute. We weren't living out of dumpsters. We were fine. But it was pretty different. And for some reason, my little 9-year-old consciousness decided, oh, I guess I'm the man of the family now. I guess I have to start figuring out what to do from here. Now, it's a silly thing for a 9-year-old to say. And my mom was in her 40s. Maybe she's in charge.
Yeah.
But that's what I decided. So I've been trying to figure it out. What do I do with my life? And how do you answer these questions has been very consciously on my mind actively since I was 9 years old.
Wow.
And the other thing that made sense to me was it's got to matter. It clearly, life matters. We're here for something.
Yeah.
Along the way, I got seriously, religious, and that deeply informs the format of how one thinks about such things. But those are the driving starting points are, I guess it's my life. Where do we go from here? And it's got to matter.
Yeah. That would take you straight into life design.
As it turns out, yeah.
So tell me about that journey. How, because I know you were involved with actually designing the first mouse with Apple and worked in mechanical engineering. And so tell me about this journey from a 9-year-old boy who's trying to figure it out, yeah, life, and then leading to life design.
So if we jump to, I grew up and just tried to be a good boy, and I was a Boy Scout, and then got good grades and did all the right stuff, and doing what they told you to do, which, by the way, I really enjoyed. That wasn't pressure. I had a great time. I loved school. I loved my childhood. And then you go to college, and I went to Stanford, and then we're supposed to start charting the path now. At that point, I'd become seriously religious in the Christian tradition. And so I actually believed that my life was a gift from beyond, that I was a steward of the life that wasn't even my own. And that God even cared about what I did with my life. So not merely do I care what I do with my life, because frankly, my life is a pretty big deal to me, but even God thinks that's important. So we have responsibility here. And so I walk into the career, and I have no idea what I want to do with my life. A lot of things interest me, but I don't have a mission. I don't have what we would now call a passion by any means. And I walk into the Career Center as a sophomore at the age of 19. By the way, I had arrived at Stanford thinking I wanted to be a marine biologist, only because I liked watching the Jacques Cousteau TV series.
A lot of people got into it through Jacques.
I loved, he invented he was one of my heroes. He invented the scuba tank. I think it was great. And literally as a child, the only life plan I had was, Jacques is getting old. He's going to die. Someone needs to take over the Calypso, his research vessel. So I should become the captain of the Calypso. Now, I'd forgotten to notice that he has 2 sons who work with him, and maybe they would get the job before I would.
And millions of fans, yeah.
And a few million fans. Yeah. I'm just a kid with a TV. And that's literally the only job idea I have. They don't have a marine biology major at Stanford. They just have biology, which is really biochemistry. So I major in that because that's the only one that's got like a word in it that I recognize. I don't like it at all, by the way. And there's the Hopkins Marine Station. There actually is a marine research facility affiliated with Stanford, 35 miles away down in Monterey Bay, real near where I live right now. And never once did it even cross my mind, hey, why don't you borrow somebody's car, drive down to Monterey, go talk to a marine biologist and see what they do. Oh, maybe your mother who wrote the book on sonar for the U.S. Navy and knows all kinds of oceanographers, whose cousin runs Woods Hole Oceanographic Research Institute on the Atlantic coast. Maybe you could ask your mom to have a conversation with some of those people. Never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Because I'm in charge of the family. I'm in charge of my life. Taking on challenges, doing the right thing, and it'll all come out well, which is incredibly stupid. I did. One of the reasons I wrote this book was I did it badly. Here's what not to do. Up until my 40s, I didn't do anything in the book, really. And so I'm going along in biology, hate it. And I go to the Career Center and I say, can you guys help me? And they go, sure, we love helping students. We have a whole building full of people who just love helping people like you. But what do you want? And they go, here's the question. What do I want to do? They go, right, that's the question. I go, yeah, okay, so let's get going. They go, wait, what's the answer? I go, what do you mean, what's the answer? I go, what do you want to do? I go, that's why I'm here. They go, no, here's how this works. You tell us what you want to do, and then we help you go find it.
Right.
I go, that's not
the hard part.
Finding is easy.
Yeah.
Finding is easy.
Yeah.
Figuring out what you want to find, that's really hard. They go, oh, you're supposed to know that. Tell you what, you go figure that out, and then you come back and let us know. And I walk out the building going, you're no fucking help at all. And the grown-ups were all useless. I thought, this is a conspiracy? I mean, they're all getting together and patting you on the head saying patronizingly useless things. I am now merely upset. In my 20s, I was insufferably indignant. I was so pissed. Like, how dare you? I've got these bajillion dollars for the buildings and all these classes. For what? And zero help on actually answering the question, why are we doing this?
Right.
So and I got no help, by the way. I went to the grown-ups who look like their act together, and they were useless. And in fact, at one point, I'm interviewing successful people because they should know. I mean, they're white people with money. They must know. So I'm talking to this guy who's an upper-level executive in a big, well-known company, I won't name, and I'm pressing him. And I'm pressing him on the spiritual questions, not merely how did you get your alignment, how did you make that decision, but also why does being this corporate VP matter to God? Why does your life matter? This matter question, right? It's got to be spiritually significant as well as operationally viable. And he's a church elder. He's supposed to be one of those good guys, and he's got crappy answers because most people are just making it up and they're faking it. And he goes, I try to be kind and compassionate to my employees, and I try to do a good job. And kind of go like, and is that it? That's something I know plenty of people who or just do that for the money. And he kind of goes, well, and I'm in his face, and I'm kind of going, I said, is that all you've got? And he finally loses it. He breaks stride and he goes, God damn it, young man, what the fuck do you want from me anyways? Here's the deal. The boss has got me by the short and curly ones all day long. I'm working my ass off 5 days a week. I don't even play golf anymore. I don't sleep with women I'm not married to. I pay my taxes on time. That's about the best I've got. What the fuck do you want from me? And truth. I stood there, and I'm 19.
That was finally some truth, though.
Finally some truth. And I'm 19, and he's 45, and I suddenly realize, I don't want anything from you.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any idea.
You don't know. Yeah.
You kicked all those questions down in the basement of your soul, and you're pretending that dog died, and I just woke it up, and you won't forgive me because when you look in the mirror at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask the question, why am I doing this? You don't know.
Yeah.
And I just thought, the one thing you can give me is, I am so not going to be you. I don't know what it's going to take, but I am not being you.
That's
and I walked away.
Incredible.
So that, maybe that moment, that particular moment, and when my dad died, are the two most formative moments in my life. Like, there's no effing way I'm going to be that guy. And so on life goes for another decade or so, and I'm just, in retrospect, clumsily prototype iterating. I'm trying the best I can. I decide that about that time, 73, I'm 67, right? The OPEC was created and the OPEC oil crisis was instituted, and suddenly there are hour-and-a-half long lines at gas stations, and gas has shot up to $1 a gallon. It's a freaking $1 a gallon, 1973.
Back then, yeah.
I'm looking at a TV in a bar, and I went, oh my God, There it is. That's the problem. I will solve the energy crisis. So I assigned myself a mission in life. I couldn't be a marine biologist, even though I could have been, but I had no idea how to do it. And so I will solve the energy crisis. And I pivoted from biology to mechanical engineering in the winter quarter of my junior year. I did an entire engineering degree in 5 quarters, stayed on, got a master's degree, came out with an advanced degree in thermosciences, and I was an advanced energy technologist in 1976. Minor detail. Nobody's doing advanced energy technology in 1976. They're just studying it. So I tried to get a job in a non-existent industry. That was not in the brochure. Oh, by the way, this really interesting stuff, this really important stuff, the stuff that will save the world, which we are now finally using 50 years later. If I had cryogenically frozen myself in June of 1976 and popped out about 2012, my timing would have been perfect. But I came out into a non-existent industry, and then I'm actually doing a part-time job for a little startup company run by some buddies of mine, doing solar energy stuff, which of course failed. But nonetheless, I had a welding torch in my hand, and I'm actually building a test rig for a hot water valve that has to do with hot water roof heaters. And the phone rings and somebody says, "Hey, Dave, it's for you," which was weird because nobody called me at that company. And it was Apple Computer. And Apple Computer said, "Oh, well, hi, we would like to talk with you." And I said, "No, you wouldn't." And they go, "No, we really would." I said, "No, my name is Dave Evans. It's an extremely common white guy name. There are dozens and dozens of them. There's a Dave Evans. I've been getting confused with the wrong Dave because it's old metal rocker in Australia.
Yeah, ACDC.
Yeah. So, and I said, "You're confusing me with the Hewlett Packard Dave Evans. He actually likes electronics. I don't. I'm a mechanical engineer. I have nothing to do with people. I think computers are boring. Don't bother me," and hung up. They call back and they go, "Hey, you can't hang up." I said, "Go, sure I can. I don't want to talk with you. You're bothering me. I have things to do. Go away." So I hung up on it 3 times. The last time they called back, they go, "Look, give me 5 minutes." Okay, fine. I said, "I don't know how you got this phone number, but you're talking to the wrong guy." They go, "I got your resume right here." I go, "No, you don't." They go, "Yes, I do." I go, "No, you don't." I go, "Read the resume. It's my resume." I go, "Who gave you my resume?" I don't want to talk to you people. And because I didn't like computing. Computing is boring. And then they finally said, "Look, just come talk to us once." I said, and Steve Jobs had just been on the cover of Time magazine. The Apple II was out. This was before they were public. And I said, "I'm not like a big U2 fan, but if I got a Bono backstage pass, heck, I'd go." So they invited me over to have lunch. I go, "Fine. Okay, so this is a really cool company. Fine. I'll go get a free lunch." They will instantly go, "Oh, you're the wrong guy. How did that happen?" And no harm, no foul. So I had lunch, and they did quickly agree. "Oh, yeah. Oh, you don't know anything about it. You have no idea what we're doing." I told you. And they kind of go, "But you look interesting." I go, "Well, actually, you're annoying, but you're actually interesting too." And they go, "Well, do you want to come back?" I go, "Okay." I go, "What do we do?" They go, "We'll meet some more people." I go, "Okay." 14 interviews later, 3 weeks later, at the end of every one of these meetings, we keep having the same outcome. Like, "This is really interesting." I said, "You don't know shit." Steve Jobs says, "You don't know shit about what we do." And I go, and then they finally say, "Well, yeah, you don't know shit about what we do, but we think you're an Apple kind of guy, so let's give it a try. What do you say?" And I said, to my great surprise, and that this was one of the biggest reframes of my life, I said, "Oh, okay, now this has nothing to do with the energy crisis." And my backup plan for the energy crisis was to go save lives. So if I can't do that, I'll do biomedical engineering. And I was actually well done. Since the energy thing was failing, I was working really hard trying to get a job in medical device companies. And I was really close to landing a product manager job for the first cauterizing scalpel, a scalpel that actually cauterized capillaries with heat. So you didn't have clamps hanging all over this body, which was going to save a lot of lives, a lot of time, and a lot of money. It's a really good thing. Let's go. I can get behind that. I was that close to landing that job, which I then blew, by the way, by not having read the chapter I hadn't yet read in the book. But and then the Apple thing came up, but I have no interest in computers at all. They bore the tears out of me. They just lie there and get warm. I had worked on gas turbines that spin 180,000 RPM, or rocket engines that fly into space. These are cool things. Here's my phone. Look, it's a black plastic. Who cares? And this is 1979, 1980. And then it occurred to me. I said, "Dave, you are trying to get a ride on a bus to go to a party that doesn't exist. It's a very important party, the energy party, or in this biomedical party, but there's nothing there. And there's this huge party going called personal computing that's trying to transform how computing technology is used in the workplace," because they gave me a sneak preview of what the LISA was going to be. This is the beginning of user-friendly computing. They said that there's this transformative impact of technology on society is actually happening, and you have no business being there, but somebody just opened the bus door and said, "Would you like to jump in?" So you can go to a party that's happening and figure out something to like, or you can like something that's not happening. What do you want to do? And I suddenly realized, oh, I'm really all about getting stuff done. I want to do things. I don't want to be standing on a corner of the signboard going, stop using gasoline. That might be true, might be prophetic, and the world doesn't need prophets, but that's not me. I'm a doer, man. I'm a maker. So let's go make stuff. So I said, what do you have to lose? Give it a try. If you hate it after a year, go do something else. And then apparently I fell into having a high-tech career.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And that's where I started learning design, because the first thing I did was the mouse. And the company that became IDEO, one of their very first commercial projects, Dean Hovey actually was the project manager. It was called Hovey Kelly Design, David Kelly, the founder of IDEO. The first incarnation of that company was Dean Hovey and David Kelly. And Dean Hovey and I was the project manager and Dean was the designer, and we built a mouse.
Amazing. Amazing. And then IDEO built a legendary design company from that.
Legendary design company.
And the design school became a thing. And
so but keep in mind, Stanford had been teaching that crazy version of design at that point for about 30 years already. David Kelly is the third generation design guru leader of the design program at Stanford, started in 1963 by John Arnold, who was a crazy guy that quit working for MIT because they wouldn't let him do it.
And Kathy.
So we have a long history of being the other guys.
But this is the generation when it exploded. Yeah,
absolutely. And then it went off and did electronic arts and all that stuff. So
I would love to hear the story of how you met Bill and how this this started.
So Bill and I were both at Apple, but at entirely different times. I was there earlier than he was. I was in the early days. I arrived 6 weeks before the company went public. They had just released the Apple III. I was on the original Lisa team. So if you look at the movie with Fassbender, that's the era that I was there.
Okay, cool.
And worked with all those people. Then Bill came later. Bill started the laptop business. Bill was the first PowerBook product manager, group product manager. And so we didn't know each other there. But my college roommate had started, who was an inveterate startup guy, started a company and pulled Bill into it. Bill from some other stuff. In fact, his younger brother had started a company, a toy company, and there was a design services firm called D2M, Design to Manufacturing, run by Andy and Bill, and for a long time. And I did work, I'd become a freelance consultant at that point, and I did a little bit of some projects now and again with those guys, and had gotten to know Bill professionally over a long period of years, a handful of times. Then along the way, in that process of trying to figure my life out, other people are too. And I'd always liked kids. I'd always done youth work. I'd been a YMCA counselor and a little league coach and that kind of stuff. Sunday school teacher for my kids. Always enjoyed youth, particularly high school through college. And at one point in my career, got so busy I didn't have time for that. And then that changed again. And I missed working with young adults. But I've been away from it. This is in the 90s. And so I said, well, go talk to people and find out what's going on. So I started doing better design work. And so I started interviewing all kinds of people, doing the empathy step of design, including meeting a guy over at UC Berkeley who actually ran a private dorm called Westminster House. And at one point he says, Dave, this stuff you care about, you should teach here. You should teach here. And I said, well, Randy, that's a really great idea, but there are only a few little problems. Maybe you could help me. Number one, I'm not on the faculty. Number two, I don't have a PhD and they're picky about that. Number three, I don't even know anybody in the faculty. Number four, I have no curriculum. Number five, it is a horrible drive from where I live across the bay to Berkeley, other than those few minor, and I have no time, other than those few minor points. It's really a great idea. He said, I can solve everything but the drive. I said, no way. He goes, way. I go, explain that to me. He explains. I go, oh. You can. Well, okay. I'll prototype it. Let's give it a try. I'll teach. I'll come up with some class. We'll teach. So I taught a class called "Finding Your Vocation." Subtitled "Is Your Calling Calling?" Taught it for 50 kids in the fall, and by semester long, 14 weeks. I was a freelance consultant at that point. I said, okay, Mondays is my pro bono day. Mondays I'm at Berkeley. I'm going to teach and I'll do office hours and talk to kids. So Monday's just Berkeley day, and half that day is in the car, but half the day is in the car. And we'll just see. Very expensive prototype, but doable. I can afford a 20% hit on revenues for a quarter. What the heck?
Sure.
So a kid walks up to me about the 10th week of the semester. He goes, by the way, Mr. Evans, you're going to be teaching in the spring, aren't you? My roommate wants to take the class. And that's what I call one of those car wreck moments, where suddenly everything slows all the way down. You have these long, complex conversations with yourself or the universe, in my case, God, which looks on the outside like about a quarter of a second. And that conversation at that moment was, oh, I didn't see this coming. Of course it's coming. Well, gee, what do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Well, tell you what I'll do. If the kids show up, I'll show up. How's that sound to you? I'm talking to God. And, and again, this is all euphemistic. And God says, I don't hear voices, but says, yeah, that works for me. I go, great. So I look at the kid and go, sure. If your roommate registers, I'll come. But tell him to get his friends together, get a quorum of kids. If they come, I'll come. 14 semesters later.
They kept showing up. Yeah.
Along that way, 2007, that was like 1999. So 2007, I get word that Bill Burnett has just become the new executive director of the design program at Stanford. This is when David Kelley landed the $35 million check from Hasso Plattner, the founder of SAP Software, to create what we now call, the formal name is the Hasso Plattner Institute for Design at Stanford, aka the D School. Yeah. So the D School had just come into existence on paper, and David Kelley realized, I can run IDEO, or I can, in the design program, I can do two things. I can be two people, I can't be three. I can't invent a design institute, I don't know what that is, and run the design program and run IDEO. I can do two, not three things. I know, I'll give up the design program. Hey, Bill, you've been lecturing on the side while running your design firm over here. You like teaching better than corporate work anyway. Why don't you quit your job, come do this full time, take a 50% cut in pay, and you'll love your life. What do you say? And in the universe's way, at the exact same time, Microsoft called Bill and said, hey, we would like you to run our television unit, a lot about televisions. How about we double your salary to come work for Microsoft? So I can either keep running this cool little company for a very good salary, I can double my income and work for Microsoft, or I can have my income and go to Stanford. So of course he goes to Stanford.
Yeah,
and so he gets the job.
Yeah.
And I knew the design guys well, and I thought, I'm doing this horrible drive to Berkeley to teach this class, and Stanford still doesn't do anything. The only reason I'm doing it at Berkeley is because there's an opportunity, purely opportunistic, but it's working in a small little way. 25, 50 kids a semester, so 14 semesters, I'm like 1,000 kids in, if I'm lucky. It's one of the biggest public universities in the world. But it's getting some notoriety, but it's still not going anywhere, because cracking the administration at Berkeley is like, forget about it. So I say, hey, Bill, let's have lunch. I haven't seen you in a while. He goes, okay, and we have lunch, and I share with him what I'm doing at Berkeley. And I said, what do you think about doing something like this at Stanford? He goes, we should totally do it at Stanford. This is a huge problem. I can't believe we haven't solved it yet. Design thinking is exactly the way to do this thing. Take all that stuff you're teaching at Berkeley, reframe it through a design thinking lens, give it to me by Monday. We'll start prototyping it this summer. We'll launch it this fall. This is great. I got to go. So like a 5-minute lunch, like bang. And that is literally what created what's now the Life Design Lab at Stanford. So we did that. That was Friday. Monday, I took all this curriculum that really was 40 years of my wandering in the wilderness trying to figure out what the hell to do with yourself, and put it into design thinking, which is exactly the right format.
Yeah.
And so and we prototyped it in the summer. We did 6 exercises on 2 different nights with a handful of former students, began to refine it. And we started teaching a course called The Designer's Voice. How do you find your voice, your vocation as a designer, just to design students? Because those are the kids we had legal access to. And we're about a year into that. And they had a career center at Stanford, the same career center that said, come back when you figure it out, 40 years later. That career center walks over and watches what we're doing and goes, this is really an interesting conversation. I love what you're doing with these students. Couldn't you do this for everybody? And Bill goes, no. And I go, yes. And Bill goes, oh, Dave's wrong, but yes always trumps no. So go with yes, we can do it. I have no idea what Dave's saying, literally. And because Bill was convinced the only reason our class worked was the students we were teaching were trying to become us. We had been professional designers who'd done products. Therefore, we can guide you. And I said, this is a discovery process. This is just applying design thinking to life, not to a product.
Right.
And it's in fact, it works better in a heterogeneous environment than it does in this homogeneous environment, which has borne to be true. Yeah. So then Designer's Voice turned into Designing Your Life in the spring of 2010. And now Bill and I have been married for 14 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. Such a great story. And
that's right. And we got so big we had to hire Kathy, who you've already talked to.
Yeah. And Kathy's also amazing. You definitely use design thinking, but you also expand it in interesting ways. And I guess maybe the first thing to ask is, you added a step. There's, traditionally there's 5 steps to the design thinking process, right? Empathize, define, and then you added a step. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So what I call step 0. So step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is empathy, definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing.
Yeah.
And that's been around a long time. But keep in mind, this goes back to what's the technical term is human-centered design, originally conceived at Stanford back in the early 60s. And of course, it was product design. How do you make products, things that work for people? And first of all, from the very beginning, human design has meant human in 2 ways. Most people think of it in only one. So the one way is ergonomically. Does the product work for me? Use it? Is it friendly? So on and so forth.
Right.
DRAM stuff, and that's fine. But it's also the human process itself for we're the human user, but also the human designer. How do people think? Where do ideas come from? How does collaboration work? So the methodologies we use for both problem definition, problem ideation, and innovation, and then finally product design, those processes have to be human too. So humanly make stuff that humans can use.
Yeah.
So that's the human piece. So a whole bunch of anthropology built into that process. Some of it empirically done that just got refined wasn't all top down, but nonetheless it does work. So now we're going to design, and then particularly the IDEO's involvement and the D-School's involvement, we're now designing, economic systems and educational processes and organizational cultures, and IDEO gets into the corporate management consulting business and competing with Bain and McKinsey. Wow, that's a lot different than making a better toothbrush or recreating an MRI machine to be not so scary for a child.
And they're hiring a ton of designers to compete again.
So now everybody, so there's a chief of user design at Vanguard Financial Services, like really? Money needs a user interface? As it turns out, it does. So that's all going off like crazy. And then here comes life design. Frankly, it's pretty late in the day when you think about it, that we actually take the rather significant caliber, weaponry called design thinking as a tool set and point it at ourselves. Like, how about designing me, in my life? A person's a little more complex than a mouse, and it has a consciousness. And so if you just apply design to it, and the problem finding, the problem definition, we got two things going on there: meaning making and ongoing personal support and growth that we got to incorporate. And the design steps in and of themselves don't handle that really well. So we've got some other tools. And what we did notice is there's an implicit truth in design. It's always true in product. This has always been true. It's just never been earned a hexagon on the chart. Is, as I put it, you can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. Very often you'll see people say, hey, here's what we need to do. I don't like that problem. Now you're stuck. You can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. Yeah. People's problem usually isn't their problem. It's their problem with their problem. Yeah. You got a problem with your problem? And that's a problem.
That's the first step, right? In every design task is, do you understand how big your problem is before we even start talking? It is, right? And are you willing to accept it? You have to be willing to accept it. Yeah. And if you don't accept it, you can't get. It turns out there are some people who teach them the history of design and even philosophy of design. But the truth is, there actually isn't. There is a deep, largely unexplicit, largely unstated, even in the design community, undiscussed set of ideological points of view that really matter. Designers are fundamentally you go into empathy and do these iterations, and then we believe by faith that we will find a solution. We actually believe that the answer is out there. We actually believe that that's an empirical experience that you can't think of by yourself. We're going to go co-create. So we believe in this co-creation thing. There's a whole bunch of belief system embedded in design's methodologies that we never talk about that way. Yeah. And one of them is that design only works in one place and one place only: reality. It does not work in the land of should. It works in the land of is. We have a big red dot, a little arrow coming out of it that says you are here, mounted on the wall in the courtyard of what's called the design studio area, where the grad students who study design at Stanford live and hang out. Is one of those you are here locator dots on like an airport map. Nice. Yep. Just to remind the students at all times, you have to be here to do design. You can't be over where you wish you were. You can't be, they should do that. Classically, design consultants get given the wrong problem. Yeah. Because most people embed the solution to the wrong problem in their question, and then the reason they fail is they're pursuing the wrong question. So most designers spend a lot of their time trying to reframe the question, and then politically being astute enough to help the client to actually get that. That's an interesting question you're asking. Problem is, it's the wrong question. If you're willing to ask this question, we can actually find an answer that might meet your goals. But if you really want me to ask the question you've given me, we're going to fail. The classic example in the social impact thing was the embrace people. So, hospitals, out in Africa that are in the rural areas say we got an incubator problem. Come help solve our incubator problem. You do the studies, you're like, no, you don't. So some kids are dying in incubators, but it's the dry part of the iceberg. The big problem is the kids dying in the villages because the women are scared to come to the hospital, because the hospital is where you go to die. And that's a cultural reality. We're never going to fix that problem. Kids are dying in droves in the villages. A couple of them are dying in your incubators. So we fixed all the incubators. You haven't solved the problem at all. Yeah.
What you got to do is you got to find a way to solve the problem in the villages. So they invent a specialized little premature baby incubator sleeping bag.
Yeah.
It's called the Embrace. And if we get these cheap little sleeping bags out in the villages, the moms might be willing to use them, and they save hundreds of thousands of lives. But you've got to be willing to ask the question, what's really going on is they're dying at home because they're scared of your building.
Right.
If you're really stuck on, we got to go fix the incubators, well, you're going to watch what you wish for, because all you're going to get is about 10 less deaths a year.
Yeah.
It's an example of,
it's a great
you've
example.
got to do acceptance. You've got to live in reality. And it's particularly true in life design because, of course, most people's start of life design is, well, mom said, or the rules are, everybody knows that success is what we call these dysfunctional beliefs. And so you've got to accept the reality in which you are and who you are. And yes, it's a pandemic. And yes, that industry just died. And okay, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So reality is tough sometimes, but it's the only place where you can make anything.
Yeah.
So we got to get there. Step one is get into reality, and then we can change it. You can't change reality from outside reality. Can't be done. There's no traction there.
That makes a lot of sense. So I want to later get into these dysfunctional beliefs if we have time.
Yeah.
But the thing that really grabbed me, and when I was getting into life design, the thing that really moved something, that really shifted something and started a process for me was this idea of coherence. And I don't think that's talked about enough.
Yes.
Sometimes in the process. And that's definitely unique to life design. I don't know it from product design or design thinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, Peter Rahm probably would argue that he was trying to make coherent design. He wouldn't use that terminology, but things that make sense and within themselves. We came up with that terminology around this meaning-making question. I mean, because in addition to it's got to work, and I got to be competent, and I got to make a living at it, or like this lifestyle, whatever it is I'm designing, it also has to be consistent with who I am. And particularly the overwhelming majority of people we work with believe that life deserves to be meaningful. Viktor Frankl, in Search for Meaning, would argue in what he called logotherapy that the fundamental definition of the human person is a meaning seeker. And so it's all about that. So we certainly just observe that's the case for many people, which transcends ideology. Bill's an existential atheist. I'm a sort of Christian-leaning, God-participating person, pretty different worldviews, but both hold structural approaches to our anthropology, what does it mean to live a good life, that are identical.
Right.
So we came up with coherence. Usually, but the thing that we're after in coherence is described by people's worldview or ideology. And so people think that it's unique to a particular brand of thinking. That's not the case at all. It's unique to just being a thoughtful person. So we looked for language that was inclusive and universal. And all it boils down to is a coherent life is one where who I am, what I believe, and what I'm doing, those three dots, we call them the three dots, who I am, what I believe, what I'm doing, are in alignment. Right. If I'm in alignment, I can look in the mirror and say, I'm living authentically, I'm living with integrity, I'm living with faithfulness. These are other kinds of words people use, but I make sense to me. I make sense to the world, and it makes sense to me. And when I wake up, and I had one of my management consulting clients years ago, woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, ran into the bathroom, flipped on the bathroom light, is staring at the woman staring back at her in the mirror going, why are we doing this? And couldn't answer, and called me. So one of my goals in life is to earn the privilege of being the person you call at 3 in the morning to say, Dave, I can't answer the person in the mirror. What do I do now? So coherent people have addressed that question. You're a coherent person when you know what you're doing and why.
Yeah.
And it's working for you. And it's working for the world.
Yeah. I think I'm just starting to get closer to coherence in my life.
It's a lifelong aspiration.
Yeah.
And compromise is okay. This isn't you are or aren't. Like, you're perfectly coherent. There's a great line in an old John Fogerty song that says, I ain't no hypocrite, except mostly every day. And Bill loves to say, we are such patsies. We decided to step up to be people who literally claim we can help you become your better self.
Yeah.
Really, where do you get off? And of course, like my dear wife, and the one sadly who's dying, but regularly has heard to say, hey, honey, there's this book. You really should read it. In fact, there's this class at Stanford. Why don't you take it? Yeah, and the one I wrote, because we give people all this counsel of these tools, and we don't shit on people. But we made an observation that if you use these tools, you might have a chance at living more coherently than if you didn't.
Yeah.
So it's up to you. But nonetheless, it's hard to pull this stuff off. So everyone's working on it. It's all a work in process. We believe that people are becoming. So there's an old classic Western thinking conundrum. Are you a human being or a human doing?
Yeah.
Human being, human doing. Human being, hi, Aaron, what do you do? Hey, don't treat me as a doing. I'm a human being, I'm a person. Like, ask me about my existential essence, man. Hey, Aaron, what's your existential essence today? Okay, all right, that's tough too. And that's another false dichotomy, dysfunctional belief. What we put up actually is a little three-arrowed circle that says be, do, become. I am a human being. I have to start with the reality of my personhood. But that's only meaningful as I go out into the world and engage and act and interact and do things and make and participate. So I'm a participant, and that doing leverages into some of my being, not all of it, and it helps me grow and make progress. And if I'm taking notes as I'm going, because I'm growing, then that actually is a becoming, and my doing informs which way I grow and become. Like as I'm going through this death, cycle with my wife, this is a huge I will come out of this thing absolutely different. And now my being is actually altered. And so I now have a generative cycle, being, doing, becoming, being, doing, becoming. And the fundamental anthropological stance we take is you are a becoming.
Yeah.
Coherence is an aspirational becoming.
That's great. That's really powerful. So we're almost running out of time. So I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And Alain de Botton in his TED Talk talks about the difference between a sermon and a lecture. And he says a lecture is trying to give you some information. A sermon is trying to change your life. And so if you had one very short sermon to give to young people about how to live, what's this one main lesson that they need to learn to live a life well lived, a joyous life, which by all signs you've managed to live, what would it be?
Choose life. You go to Deuteronomy 29 in the Old Testament. You see the end of Moses' life. Now, regardless, and you're sitting in Israel as I speak to you. Now, so regardless of anybody's worldview and point of view, this is an old wisdom tradition. This is an interesting guy.
Yeah.
And if you buy the Moses story as given in the tradition at all, this is a big deal. I mean, this guy's done some pretty amazing things. And he's about to die. It's his last sermon. He stands up before the nation of Israel and he says, see this day, I set before you life and death. Choose life that you might live. And he goes on that. And along the way, he says, and this thing that I, the Lord, am calling you to is not too hard for you. You need not send someone up to the top of the mountain to get it, to bring it back to you, by the way, which he did with the tablets. You don't have to do that again. You need not send someone to swim across the sea and bring it back to you. No, it is very near to you. It is so near to you, it is in your mouth that you might see it, taste it, and do it. Wow. Now, I'm thinking, I'm one of the Israelites, and I'm listening to this sermon, and I'm hearing the counsel, choose life. Here's two things, life, death. Choose life. And I'm thinking, like I didn't know that? And this sounds like, here's financial advice. Buy low, sell high. Hey, thanks. Really deep insight. So I'm thinking one of two things. When I read this the first time, I thought one of two things is going on. Either thank God, Joshua's taking over. Moses is old. Stick a fork in it. We're done here. And it's like, dude, I knew this. We're down to the shallow water. Okay. Appreciate all the work you did. Really glad you're done. Or apparently Moses thinks that I'm choosing death a lot and I don't realize it. That this death choice is much more popular than it deserves to be. And if I could just get my hands around it, there is so much more life waiting for me that I'm not getting. And maybe he knows what he's talking about. So I'm thinking to myself, either this is stunningly stupid or it's a big damn deal.
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to bet it's a big damn deal. Because if it is, and I miss it, that's a nightmare. And if it is, and it's true, it's a win. And so what I mean by this, if I had to preach a sermon, it's just, see, I set before you this day, life and death, choose life that you might live. What does that mean? It means we all are becomings. We all are growings. There is no right answer. Get out of the transactional view of reality where it's getting it right and then all will be well. We're making this up as we go. We are wayfinders, not navigators. There is no GPS for life. There's only a long series of prototype iterations. We're doing the best we can. So learn how to wayfind, learn how to experiment, learn how you're going to grow into the person who, and I tell 21-year-olds, your neocortex isn't even formed until you're 28 years old. You're not supposed to know who you're supposed to be when you grow up. You haven't even finished growing up yet. Well, what do? You learn how to grow into the person that by the time you become 28, you'll have the resources available to respond to the invitations that life is giving you at that moment in time. People keep asking me, Dave, what are you going to do after Claudia dies? And I say, I don't know. And they go, are you scared about that? I go, no, I don't know, because I can't know. The only person who knows what Dave will do after Claudia dies is her widow. I'm not her widow. I'm waiting for him to show up. A couple of months from now, there will be a person who's responsible for that question.
Yeah.
I'm not him. Ask him. That's like 6 months from. I can't tell you how much I grew in the last 3 days.
Yeah.
Last 3 days changed my life. If you asked me 6 days ago those questions, I answered them entirely differently than I answered them today. We're just in a long improv skit. So get good at the improv and enjoy the ride. That's choosing life.
Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your honesty. It's amazing to hear from you.
What else do we have?
That's all we have.
We're just trying to show up.